Fauci is giving Attorney General Garland a run for his money in the race to prove who is more contemptible. During his testimony, Fauci also doubled down, trying to defend the most draconian and irrational pandemic policies, like mask mandates for children under 5. Watch as Republican Congressman Michael Cloud put Fauci on the spot.
I'm going to go through a list of COVID mitigation measures that you supported over the course of the pandemic and ask you to give me a yes or no as to whether you believe these measures were justified. Business closures?
Early on, when 5,000 people were dying a day, yes.
Church closures?
Same thing.
School closures?
Again, the
stay-at-home orders?
These were important when we were trying to stop the tsunami of deaths that were occurring early on. How long you kept them going is debatable.
Mask mandates for adults, mask mandates for children, mask mandates for children under 5.
And going back to what I said before, all of that is in the context of, at the time, 4,000 to 5,000 people a day
there's scientific evidence for that?
Excuse me?
Mask mandates for children under 5, there's scientific evidence supporting that?
There was no study that did masks on kids.
And here is Congressman Michael Cloud of Texas. Dr. Fauci, Congressman, what do you think of him? What was your impression?
Well, the impression is that he's not willing to take responsibility for any of the direction, which it turns out ended up being a lot of it misinformation that was foisted upon the American people. And that's very concerning to so many Americans when they sit and are still dealing with the effects of COVID.
And to hear him say that that the unvaccinated are responsible for hundreds of thousands of American deaths, your thoughts?
It's really disturbing, and it shows this kind of aloofness that we've had from him and from others in that sphere, to where these mandates were foisted upon the American people. And we keep hearing both sides of it. We'll hear from him, well, I didn't authorize that, I didn't recommend that. And then at the same time, we also have video of him saying, specifically, well, I recommended to the president to shut the country down, knowing that it would affect the economy, that it would affect the lives of people. And then we all heard what was being told to us in the way of vaccines, that this is going to stop you from getting it, it's going to stop you from spreading it. And then the troubling thing for me, and what we talked about, was the fact that when the data changed on that, there was no messaging change. As a matter of fact, there was a doubling down on that. And to this day, we don't even have an apology to say, hey, we're sorry that information ended up to be different. There's just this we are the science and we are what's right, and the rest of the people, we saw people losing their medical license who were qualified, even more qualified to speak to this than Dr. Fauci was, and people lost their jobs, people were kicked out of the military, people lost their livelihoods, and people lost their lives. And it was really, really troubling to see where he's at, and that there doesn't seem to even be recompense for it at this point.
And hundreds of thousands of children couldn't get to school to learn to keep up with their own intellectual and physical development. In point of fact, we learned that was a punishing decision, and the price was paid by those children who basically were most in need, were the most deprived. And those deficiencies in learning may be with so many of those children for years and years to come. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and these children, we are still suffering it as they continue to move through the education, their education throughout their lives. There's still this learning loss, wherever grade they were at the time. And I remember passing by the computer one day when my son was distance learning, because that's what the school was doing at the time. And there was, the teacher asked one child, it's like, what are you doing? The child was really animated. It turns out they were playing a video game instead of participating. But you think about the single parent with a child who, do I go to work or do I deal with this? You know, all the situations that we had people going through, and the understanding. And yes, there were people with particular comorbidities or conditions that made them more susceptible, but by and large, the children were not in the primary affected group when it came to COVID, but yet they were still subject to the same draconian lockdown scenarios as everyone else, and then the teacher unions that came to seemed to care more about staying home than what was really best for the kids that joined in this process as well. It was really disturbing, and so, but a lot of this goes back to the messaging we had from Dr. Fauci and others who provided the cover and the quote, they'll say it's recommendations, but everybody knew that if you don't follow the recommendations coming out, that you open yourself up to lawsuit abuse.
Congressman, I'd like to ask you about that. The reality is that there are two teachers unions that are responsible for devastation in the lives of many young students who were denied their education because it became a matter of ideology for those teachers unions. And there hasn't been a single investigation by the Congress or the Senate into those teachers unions. And my question is, why not? Because they acted, to me, just horribly.
Right. We did have Weingarten before our committee, and I questioned her on these issues as well. You know, some of the things that were in their policy manual, so to speak, and the things that were mentioned, the things they were advocating for. There was so little in there on math, reading, and science, and so much on a lot of the politicizing and wokeness we see going on in our education system right now. But you're right. We do need to press them harder on this issue because they were advocating for things that were not helpful to the children, and they should be advocating for what's best for educating our kids.
Yeah. The Republican Party says it is all about the family, that they, and when it comes down to it, where is the action? Why not investigate people who harmed our children? It is worth more than a person appearing before the committee, and I salute you for doing so. But at some point, the Republicans have got to decide they're going to do something about things instead of send strong letters and have a drive-by in a hearing, if I may say that.
I totally agree with you. You know, I've been one of the ones saying we hold the purse strings. That is the big authority that our founders gave us. What should happen is we bring light to these things in investigating, and then are able to refer them to the DOJ, and the DOJ hopefully would not be corrupt and would begin to prosecute on some of these things that have a criminal component to it. But the big leverage that Congress has is the purse strings, and until we're willing to say we're not going to fund bad activity, they will continue to have bad activity. And so we've got to believe what we believe, at least as strong as the Marxist left believes what they believe. And I think that's what's frustrating to people back home is that they see we're tired of the letters, we're tired of strongly worded statements, we're tired of words and not action. We've got to see action.
Well, good for you. And I want to turn to Dr. Fauci again, responding to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said he belongs in prison and should be tried for mass murder after his appearance before Congress. What do you think of her, if you will, conclusions?
I think from the moral standpoint, yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so to figure out what code or those kind of things, but it's very obvious that what he did and the authority he was used was not in keeping with public service and him staying true to the integrity of what should be his office that he was operating in. The misinformation that he put out, it seemed to be directed more by political science than actual science, as he dubbed himself the voice of science. And so many lives destroyed, careers destroyed. We're still reeling from the impact.
And we're still, big pharma is going its way. The vaccine companies are going their way without any accountability whatsoever. The public health agencies are just rife with NIH grants and connections. There's a huge network of doctors looking toward, a couple of bucks, a grant, and maybe a trip to Wuhan, China. It's despicable what we witnessed, and there's no, again, the folks representing the American people are not representing what is really in my opinion, what is outrage on the part of people. They don't even know now what is proper scientific, whatever you would like to call it, in terms of vaccinations. What ages should they be receiving vaccinations? What ages should they not? There's still this crazy public dialogue that makes it sound like everyone's the same age, they're all at the same height and weight, and one size fits all. It's preposterous. And meanwhile, let's make some more money for the drug companies.
Right. Replacing that doctor-patient relationship that's local and personal with this, quote, public health, top-down Washington circle sphere of influence. And you're right, the kind of incestuous relationship that's between these drug companies and then what's going on in the health organizations that are supposed to be serving the American people isn't right, and it's not proper. And one of the things we question Fauci on is even the grant writing process. Our taxpayer dollars going to these grants, and then he signs off on them, but there's no accountability. And he even says, "Oh, I don't read them. I don't look at them. I just." Well, these layers of there's supposed to be layers of accountability end up being layers of plausible deniability when we come and try to bring people to account. So,
but Congress has thrown away its oversight function. They've let it just slip away. Then it was taken away, and now it's gone. There is very little oversight being conducted by the House of Representatives, and the Senate almost none. Why in the world? I mean, it's like the Congress wants to be a club, and they don't want to have to actually do something. Let's just keep it the way it is. The status quo, preserve it, and make a little theater for the TV cameras. Am I being too harsh?
Well, there's certainly an element of that. Over some of this is generational. Some of it's certainly happened over decades where Congress has ceded its authority, and now these agencies really feel like we're the permanent government and you elected officials are the temporary government. And until we have members who come here who really care more about the country than their post, and us realizing that, we've got to rein in this government that's grown way beyond its control. If we don't have the ability to provide oversight, some of that is because the government's too big. It's outgrown its man. In these agencies, you look at what they were stood up to do and what they're doing now. They've gone well beyond their scope of what they're doing, and a lot of times aren't accomplishing with any sort of efficacy the goals that they're supposed to be accomplishing.
So, Congressman, a lot of your colleagues are talking about, and my guess is that you are focused on it as well, the NIH, the amount of money that the NIH is bringing in from royalties, from the scientists who are working there. But we're talking about almost $750 billion being brought in there. And this is a very troubling relationship between big pharma, big government, and the NIH, and the influence that they drive throughout the entire medical community and pharmaceutical industry. How can that be improved in terms of both integrity and performance for the American people, as well as assured integrity across the board?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that even in the best of intentions that wouldn't be lingering in the back of someone's mind, the amount of dollars that are underpinning these sorts of things. And it's hard to provide oversight for something that's funding you at the same time. And so these health organizations that should be being a check on big pharma or any other one involved in sort of things, when they're getting these paychecks or kickbacks from them at the same time, it's really hard to expect them to provide that kind of oversight. So we've got to look at reevaluating how that's done and what could be done there. But we've got to have people of integrity. If you have people who are not going to be integrous, there's no amount of laws that will be able to overcome people who are intent on corruption and self-service.
And when you look at Dr. Fauci, his relationship with the Communist Chinese, the CCP, he denied and lied about Wuhan. The CDC was resistant to calling COVID-19 a pandemic, even though it's a numerical matter. All you have to do is add up the number of countries that are required to have a pandemic, and we hit that 2 weeks before ultimately the WHO and the CDC called it a pandemic. We have a lack of integrity at even the most basic level. While we're trying to follow the science in this country, the science sure as hell isn't following basic, simple decency and honesty, and that's got to change. You got
very much
Fauci
so.
saying that. I'm sorry, I was going to.
Oh yeah,
I'm sitting here just still muttering about Fauci. Go ahead.
You look at the Wuhan lab, for example, and at the very basics, we know they destroyed data. Now, should we be involved with the kind of labs that destroy data that might be look bad on themselves? You can look at all the other things that we do, but at a very minimum case, we asked Dosick about that. We said, knowing what you know now, would you change anything? And it's like, no. Like this is what the American people find really hard to believe. They get the first couple weeks, first couple months when we were trying to figure it out, but the fact that you have people with that kind of hubris that at this point don't have any remorse or not able to look at it and say, yeah, there were some definite lessons learned. We shouldn't have been involved with that. That's what troubles the American people.
Experimenting with deadly viruses. We are watching right now this thing open up over 700. I just don't even want to get into the numbers of it. The reality is that we've got a mess and it's got to be fixed. And so far, the 118th Congress hasn't done a lot, Congressman, but you've done more than anybody else ever has. So we appreciate that and hope that this will be the beginning of an effort to alter what is a just unsatisfactory and frankly corrupt a corrupt system that is not serving the American people nor this country. Thanks so much, Congressman. Congressman
Yes, sir.
McLeod, thanks, and come back soon.